Bienvenido a Café Espacial. Conduce y dirige el doctor Fermín Romero Vázquez. Análisis con expertos en materia sobre el futuro de la agenda espacial global, así como las diversas temáticas inherentes a la exploración espacial, los beneficios de la ciencia y la tecnología espacial para toda la sociedad y los problemas derivados de esta en términos de desarrollo para mejorar la calidad de vida en la Tierra y su potencial extensión a otros confines del universo a través de la nueva carrera espacial y el New Space. Café Espacial. Es momento de un café.
Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to this new episode in this 14th season, and we are very happy to and pleased to have a very special guest in this occasion, Dr. Nicoleta Bini. Dr. Nicoleta Bini is graduated in political science from the University Sapienza of Roma with a thesis on international space law. Since 1991, she works for the Italian Space Agency, AC. Currently, she serves in the AC Litigation Legal and Corporate Affairs Office, where she deals with international cooperation agreements of the agency and provides support to national competent authorities in addressing legal aspects of the space-related intergovernmental agreements. She also handles international space law topics, including registration of space objects, legal issues related to space remote sensing activities, and the evolution of the national space law. She is a member of the Italian delegation of the legal subcommittee of the UN Caucus and was a member of the Italian delegation to the ESA International Relations Committee, where she served as chair from 1st July to 2020 through May 2023. The subject of today's talk is the Italian space law redefines and revolutionizes the future of the global space sector. To describe this, let me tell you that Italia's recent enactment of the Space Law Framework Law 89/2025, marks a pivotal moment redefining and revolutionizing the future of the Italian space sector in the new space era. By establishing a clear and comprehensive legal framework, Italy is solidifying its position as a key player in the international space community by developing a model to govern our space activities. This law emphasizes on sustainable development, safety, and investment, is poised to stimulate the new wave of innovation, promising to shape the next era of space exploration and commercialization. Italy stands itself together with other nations' space regulation, with high impact beneficial implications for the economy and science in the new space race, opening these frontiers for the national space, new space. With this law, Italy aims to strengthen its technical capacity and its role as relevant player in the international space governance. Italy is joining the regulatory boom of national regimes, a global trend in which some countries like France, the United Kingdom, and Luxembourg stands out in Europe for developing national space legal frameworks. This law not only regulates the present, but also accurately anticipates the challenges of Europe's space future with a comprehensive ethical and sovereign vision. Therefore, this law invites us to reflect on a fundamental question: can such national frameworks contribute to updating multilateral space treaties, or is there a risk of the pending regulatory fragmentation? Thank you, dear Nicoletta, to be with us. And to start this talk, let me ask you about the legislative process and its development. And first of all, the law consists of 31 articles. What was the most debated or challenging articles to draft and why?
Good morning, and let me first of all thank you very much for this invitation and for the opportunity to share some highlights on the new Italian space law. So in Parliament, indeed, there have been many discussions devoted to the importance of the space sector and on how to best promote it at national level in a worldwide scenario. Emphasis was also reserved to the startups and small and medium enterprises role. Some concerns have been raised on the rules relevant to the articulated authorization process set out in the law, as well as on the mandatory insurance policy for national operators.
Excellent. About the, regarding these same issues, how does the new law balance industrial policy, scientific development, and national security, which are all mentioned as imperatives?
So the balance you mentioned is really one of the main goals and challenges of the law, which is titled Provisions Related to Space Economy. The law recognizes space as a strategic crossroads of national geopolitical, economic, scientific, and strategic interests. The law has two objectives: to regulate access to space for national operators, outlining a prior authorization regime, and at the same time to introduce measures to boost the national space economy, including a national space economy plan and an associated space economy fund. The law aims at providing legal certainty so as to facilitate private investments in the space sector and in innovation. On the other hand, the political and security dimension of the space activities to be authorized will be assessed by several national competent authorities involved in the authorization process. And
Excellent.
Our expectation is that a proper balance between industrial development on the one side and security concerns on the other will be reached.
Great. Well, the document notes that Italy lacks a dedicated legal framework despite being an active space nation since the 1960s. What specific events or challenges prompted to the creation of this comprehensive law now?
Yes, indeed, Italy was one of the first nations to send an artificial satellite into space, and it has developed high-level expertise in all space fields, including science, research, technologies, and applications like telecommunications, Earth observation, development of pressurized module for space station, launchers, and so on. It should be noted that the national space programs have been mostly conducted by public institutional entities like the Italian Space Agency, ASI, which was founded in 1988, or its precursor, the National Research Council or the Ministry of Defense. In recent years, however, different non-institutional entities have started to undertake independent space activities under their own responsibility, mostly within the new space sector. Therefore, it has become imperative for Italy to fully implement its obligations under international space law, in particular Article 6 of the Space Treaty, which requires authorization and supervision of non-governmental activities. In this way, the national legal system governing the space sector is being completed, and Italy joins many other states with which the Italian state and Italian operators have relationships in this field.
That sounds very good for the enterprise investments, but beyond commercial interest, what is the law's vision for Italy as a normative contributor to the global space governance?
Thank you very much for this question. Italy chose to enact a comprehensive measure on space economy, setting up a regulatory system for space activities and at the same time introducing several instruments to foster innovation, paying specific attention to the role of startups and small and medium enterprises. From a technical point of view, the law promotes a responsible and safe use of outer space, conferring particular importance on the principles of safety, resilience, and environmental sustainability of space activities that will be defined in the technical regulation foreseen under the law. And compliance with these principles for the activities that would be proposed under the law is a mandatory requirement and would be the very first assessment that ASI, the Italian Space Agency, will perform at the beginning of the authorization process. We deem that the practical implementation of responsible behaviors endorsed by the law could contribute to the global space governance.
Right. It seems that Italy will be a key actor in the global governance for space. Congratulations. And talking about the regulatory and institutional framework, tell us, how will this new international governance model, which involves ASEAN and CAMIN, the International Committee for Space and Aerospace Policies, particularly improve upon the previous regulatory system?
So it is important to note that the Interministerial Committee for Space and Aerospace Policy, the comment that you have mentioned, has been set up in 2018 under Law Number 7, which represents a major reform of the governance of the Italian space sector. This law also entrusted the high-level coordination and final responsibility for space and aerospace policies to the Prime Minister, who chairs the comment and may appoint a delegated political authority. Currently, so at present, the Minister of Enterprises and Made in Italy holds this position. And returning to law of 2025, number 89, this law outlines a comprehensive legal framework, introducing a prior authorization, supervision and liability regime for space activities, which is complemented by provisions for amendments, suspension and termination of the authorization, as well as provisions for the transfer of the space activity and specific sanctions. In the new legal setup, ASI plays a central role, having been appointed as the national authority responsible for developing the technical regulation for the space sector and of supervising the authorized space activities. Moreover, ASI will assess the applicant's moral, professional, and financial capacity and the compliance of the proposed space activities to the technical principles established by the law. On the other hand, the Interministerial Committee, the comment, will assess the potential prejudice of the proposed space activities with respect to national defense, security, and foreign policy interests, as well as possible links between the applicant and foreign states representing a threat to peace and international security. The competence to issue the final authorization rests with the responsible authority, that is the Prime Minister or the delegated political authority.
Which is very common in many countries. The highest responsibility in the space sector is at high level. Thank you for this response. The law delegates authority for space to the Ministry of Enterprise and Made in Italy, MIMIT. What role will the Italian Space Agency, ASI, plays in the technical and administrative support for these procedures?
So, Specifically, the Minister of Enterprises and Made in Italy, as the delegated political authority, currently holds the position of responsible authority who will issue the final authorization under the law, under the new law. And within the authorization procedures, ASI has been assigned the task of verifying the mandatory requirements for both the applicants and the activities. That is, for the applicants, as I said before, their professional, financial, and moral capacity, as well as the availability of an insurance coverage and a collision avoidance service, and the compliance of the proposed space activities with the principles of safety, resilience, and environmental sustainability. Only upon a positive result of this assessment will ASI transmit the application to the responsible authority, to the coordinating body of the comment, which is assured by the Office of the Military Advisor to the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Defense for the pursuing of the process.
Excellent. It is important to see this collaboration among CAMIT, MIMIT, and the Ministry of Defense for the implementation of the law. Thank you so much for the clarification. The authorization process has a 120 days timeline. How does ASI plan to manage the volume of application and ensure the deadline is consistently met?
So, as anticipated, the authorization process involves ASI and other institutional actors, all of whom are aware of the challenging timeline posed by the law. At all events, ASI, within its verification duties, would be allowed to suspend the deadline should it decide to undertake inspection or ask the applicants for further documentation. Currently, ASI is elaborating the technical regulation and is contributing to the drafting of the implementing decree that will define the specifications of the authorization process. And in parallel, ASI is studying the necessary internal organization reform to assure the most suitable governance to fulfill the new functions and roles that the law assigns to the agency.
Right, excellent. Tell us, how will the National Registry Space Objects as mandated by the Article 15 be implemented and maintained to ensure alignment with the UN treaties?
Okay, I would like to recall that the National Registry of Objects launched into outer space was established in 2005 by law number 153 that entrusted the agency to set the National Registry up and to maintain it. In continuity, Law 85 of 2025 confirms the ASI responsibility in these regards and rules the registration of space objects for which Italy is the launch state under the 1975 UN Convention on Registration or under other international norms. So the law requires operators to provide ASI with information stipulated by the 1975 Convention as well as those included in the General Assembly resolution approved in 2007, which contains recommendation on enhancing the practice in registering space objects. In addition, the law of 2025 requires information to adapt the registration regime within the new legal system. As an example, the operators will be asked to provide the reference of the authorization they will obtain. And finally, the law establishes a complementary registry for space objects that Italian operators acquire while they are already in orbit. So in the end, overall, we consider that the updated registration regime fully complies with the relevant UN treaties and General Assembly resolutions.
Thank you for clarifying this process for countries like Mexico. It is important to know this kind of procedures. Given that sensitive application can be escalated to the Council of Ministers, what criteria determine if a project is deemed sensitive?
The Interministerial Committee for Space and Aerospace Policies, that comment will be responsible for defining these criteria and assessment. The comment may, in fact, submit an application to the Council of Ministers should it consider that fundamental interest of the Italian Republic would be affected by a proposed space activity.
Thank you so much for this important and relevant information. Let's go to a brief pause and then let's continue with this interesting topic.
Okay.
Te quiero despierto, te anhelo vibrante, te pienso fiel, latiendo al ritmo de tu recuerdo, camino en el renacer. Corazón de maguey, corazón de maguey, mil mentes son más de mil razones buenas, la tradición, el color de la luna nueva, corazón de maguey, corazón de maguey. Yo nací en el ombligo de la luna, de tu
Well, friends, we're again with our special guest of today. And for this second part of the talk, let's talk about economic and commercial impact of the Italian space law. And to start with this phase of the talk, dear Nicoletta, please tell us, the law aims to reduce entry barriers for innovative and emerging space actors. How does the special considerations for startups and space or medium enterprises, particularly regarding financial capacity, work in practice?
So, as you perfectly said, the law provides several measures to foster startups and small and medium enterprises activities. The financial capacity of the applicant is one of the requirements to be assessed by ASI and should be adequate to both the risks associated to the proposed activity and to the company size, and with the aim of facilitating the positive assessment of the financial capacity of startups and small and medium enterprises. Specific factors are considered in the law, like the presence of institutional investors in those companies, or the participation of startups to incubators or accelerators. Moreover, within the liability regime, innovative startups may be required to pay a lower mandatory insurance premium. And finally, specific measures are introduced to ensure the involvement of startups and small and medium enterprises in public procurement tenders for space technologies and activities, so kind of mandatory quotas.
It sounds very, very interesting to foster this industry. Thank you so much for sharing this information. Tell us, could you provide a more detailed breakdown on how the fees and administrative contributions for alliances are calculated based on the mission risk and operators type?
Okay, thank you again for these questions. Exactly, the law foresees the possibility of differentiating the contribution and reimbursement costs due for the application on the basis of the size, of the complexity, and of the purposes of the proposed space activities. An example, purely commercial or research purposes, and on the associated risks to that space activities. The criteria to apply this principle in practice will be identified in the implementing regulations. And with regard to the operation type, as you said, possible reduction would apply again for startups and small and medium enterprises.
Great. The law regulates the use of stratospheric platforms and satellite constellation. How does it handle the unique challenges posed by mega constellations and their potential for orbital congestion?
So the law explicitly mentions satellite constellation missions, stipulating that only one authorization would be required for the launch of more satellites belonging to one constellation. We are aware of the unique challenges posed by mega constellations, their impact on orbital congestion and space traffic in general. The law itself does not contain any other specific requirement. However, any such activity shall be assessed through its compliance with the principles of safety, resilience, and environmental sustainability, which again are being developed by the Italian Space Agency in the technical regulation.
Thank you so much. This is very important in terms of space debris, for example. Thank you.
Yes.
How does the law address emerging commercial activities like on-orbit servicing, manufacturing, space resource extraction, space mixing, and in situ resource utilization issue international dimensions across LSC, etc.
So the law enumerates a long but not exhaustive list of space activities, including launches, space objects, in-orbit operations and re-entry, assembly and use of space stations, as well as emerging space activities you have mentioned, like in-orbit servicing and utilization of space resources. So as regards in-orbit servicing, no particular requirements are set in the law itself, but technical regulation will contain detailed rules on that regard. On the other hand, the law specifies that exploration, extraction, and utilization of natural space resources should be pursued in compliance with the legal instruments adopted at international level. In this respect, I would like to recall that Italy was one of the first signatories in 2020 of the Artemis Accords, whose section number 10 is devoted to that topic. And we also contribute to the discussions within the Accords community relevant to their implementation. Italy, moreover, actively participates in the deliberations of the dedicated working group of the legal subcommittee of UN COPUOS, which is due to elaborate a set of recommended principles for space resources activities. So specific attention is and will be devoted to the international frame for these activities.
Yeah, I'm sure Italy will be a key play actor in these negotiations or in the working group for these important issues, because these are very close in the near future. Well, regarding safety and sustainability, tell us, how will the new law enforce mandatory insurance, and what specific type of damage are covered?
So, as you said correctly, the law introduces a third-party liability regime. In particular, operators are liable for damages caused by authorized space activities up to certain amounts set out in the law. And they are required to obtain insurance coverage associated to the risks of the space activity they will propose. So the applicants have an obligation to take out an insurance contract or an equivalent financial guarantee according to the prescriptions that will be specified in the authorization provision. In the lack of this mandatory requirement, the applicant will not get the authorization, but again, more detailed rule will follow in the implementing measures.
Thank you to share this important information. What are the specific requirements for the mandatory end of life of the orbiting procedures, and how will compliance be monitored?
So again, would be the technical regulation that ASI is elaborating that will identify the specific requirements relevant to the end of life and the orbiting procedures. To this end, I would like to share with you that ASI is considering, of course, the International Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines, as well as policies of other national and European institutional actors. As mentioned before, ASI will be responsible for monitoring, for supervising the compliance of the authorized space activities with the provisions of the law, with the provisions that will be specified in implementing regulations, and with the provision and prescriptions that will be contained in the authorization measure. So the monitoring procedure we are considering will include access to operators' documentation and on-site inspections.
Great, that sounds good for the space sustainability. The law requires operators to demonstrate resilience to cyber attacks. What are the key cybersecurity standards or certifications that operators must achieve for missions approval?
So again, cybersecurity standards to be met by the applicants will be defined within the resilience requirements in the technical regulation that ASI is developing. So we are working on them.
Excellent. And tell us what provisions are in place to address the environmental impacts of space activity, such as light pollution, electromagnetic interference, and space debris.
So, measures relating to environmental impacts covering space debris and light pollution will be addressed in the technical regulation. But as regards light pollution in particular, ASI is trying to define requirements consistent with the spirit of the law. That is, asking the operators to limit as much as possible light pollution. On the other hand, the national competent authority for the electromagnetic interference is a department of the Ministry of Enterprises and Made in Italy, which is responsible for the national radio frequency spectrum regulation and planning. And of course, we will coordinate with them.
Perfect. How will the law requirement of access to certified collision avoidance services work for the smaller operators without their own internal capabilities?
Thank you again very much for this question. Yes, it's true. One of the mandatory requirements for the applicants is the availability of a collision avoidance service, which the operators may either provide on their own or procure from certified suppliers. In both cases, the collision avoidance service must be compliant with the specification that will be defined in the technical regulation. At ASI, we are aware that currently there are few suppliers for this kind of service, but they are nevertheless expected to grow in the future. One option could be, as of today, to benefit from the service offered for free by the European Union Space Surveillance and Tracking Consortium for satellites registered for that service. And ASI itself is developing a system capable of providing such a service. This topic will also be discussed with the national operators, including the smaller ones, to identify the most suitable solutions.
Great. Talking about international relations challenges and the future outlook on the new space, please tell us how will the law provisions on recognition foreign authorizations ensure that Italy remains an attractive hub for international space operator?
Well, thank you very much for this question. Maybe it is too early to answer to it right now. Italian law applies to space activities carried out by operators of any nationality in the Italian territory, as well as to space activities carried out by Italian operators abroad. So if an Italian operator has obtained an authorization by another state, the foreign authorization may be recognized by Italy either under an international treaty with a foreign state or upon request of the operator if it is deemed that the foreign authorization meets requirements equivalent to those of the Italian law. In any case, there could be situations in which foreign authorization will be nevertheless necessary for Italian operators, as an example, to perform launching activities abroad. So once the new complete national legal framework has been put in place and its practical implementation has started, we could assess if the Italian model will remain an attractive one.
I am sure of that, of course.
We hope.
Yes. Well, the law addressed the issue of liability in accordance with the 1972 Liability Convention. How does it strengthen Italy's ability to represent its jurisdiction and several international claims?
So correctly, as you said very clearly, the law introduces a liability regime which is in accordance with the 1972 Liability Conventions, to which Italy is a party to, and in accordance with other applicable international treaties. We may say, we believe that the law strengthens Italy's ability to represent its jurisdiction and settle international claims, since first of all, it establishes a system to implement the provision of 1972 Convention, which governs international liability among states. In particular, the law rules the allocation of liability between the Italian state and national operators for damages caused by authorized space activities, and provides for the state's right of recourse against the operators when it has paid compensation for damages to third parties in fulfillment of its international obligations.
That is a good advance in the international regime. Thank you for sharing this information. The law is a foundation for national space governance. What are the next practical steps for Italy to take in implementing the new legal framework?
Again, thank you very much for this question. Yes, the law foresees one or more decrees to enact the provisions and principles that it contains. These implementing acts will be approved upon a comprehensive procedure involving many institutional actors, including several ministries, the Comint, the Cybersecurity National Agency, and the National Security Authorities. Currently, it is envisaged to have one Prime Minister decree detailing rules of the authorization process, and the technical regulation that ASI is developing will be annexed to this Prime Minister decree. Another Prime Minister decree will address the specifications relating to Earth observation activities and space-based data management, to their sensitivity thresholds, and so on, to safeguard national defense, security, and foreign policy interest. And the further Prime Minister decree will set out the technical requirements for the spaceports and of the relevant orbital and suborbital operations from those spaceports.
Right. It is very, very interesting to see how you're planning to work on these interesting infrastructure areas for space development. How will Italy ensure the new law avoids contributing to the fragmentation of global governance and instead supports the development of existing space treaties?
This is a very important question, but one of the main objectives of the law is to ensure the full national implementation of the international space law regime and the application of the fundamental principles of the United Nations space treaties to activities carried out also by non-institutional entities. And in pursuing this effort, Italy has defined and still is elaborating its national measures, taking into account other states' models and experiences, and of course the ongoing relevant discussions at regional and international level on the regulatory aspects of space activities.
Right, that sounds really, really good for the international governance. And in the context of the new space race, the new space and Italian space law, what is the expectation of ASI and around for the development of space activities in the next 15 years, for example?
Well, thank you very much. Again, I think that this is a very difficult question to answer right now. The law was passed only 3 months ago, and we are working on it, implementing measures. Development of space activities in the next 15 years will depend not only on the success of a single national space law, but also on the further evolution of space activities, new space in general, and also on the effectiveness of the instruments to be put in place at international level to address the challenges brought about the intensification and diversification of space initiatives worldwide. Moreover, it is a view that due to the multinational character of many private companies and their commercial activities, we should also consider how different states' space law will interact in the future. So our law 89 of 2025, again, is meant to complete the legal framework in furtherance of the Italians' obligations under international space law and promote the growth of the national space ecosystem, but bearing in mind the need to set up a virtuous system. And we hope that the solutions that will be adopted in the end will strike the right balance between development and sustainability.
I agree. It's a very short time to have definitions of how this will impact the economy, the sustainability, and many other issues, of course. But I'm sure you will do it because you are leading this globally. So I'm sure you will do a very good job in the world. And while we're finishing this talk but not finishing with ask you for a final reflection and for the farewell of the episode. Please tell us, what do you think on all these we're talking about?
Well, first of all, again, thank you very much for inviting me to this interview. And I think that I would like to conclude by reiterating my view, our view, that the approval of the law was necessary and that the Italian government took this opportunity to introduce thorough measures to incentivize national space economy, advocating at the same time safe and responsible uses of outer space. I would like to recall that the national space law in general are crucial to ensure compliance with the principles enshrined in the binding and non-binding international space law instruments, most of which were approved within the framework of the United Nations. Conformity to these principles is a measure tool to face emerging challenges in the space domain. We talk about sustainability, space traffic in general. And as you may be aware, Italy will assume the chairmanship of Young Couples for the biennium 2026-2027, and we really look forward to this important occasion, also to share with the other United Nations member states our experience in the implementation of the national space law.
Congratulations and much success leading this important working process in UN Couples. I know the legislation will address critical gaps in safety, cybersecurity, environmental sustainability, and traffic management, or areas where fragmented national approaches have created regulatory confusion, unfortunately. But the challenge lies in harmonizing existing national frameworks without overriding member state sovereignty. And you are leading this in European Union, so I'm sure you will have a good success. For now, let me congratulate you and tell you thanks for this very, very interesting talk, my dear Nicoleta.
Thank you very much again. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. And for my audience, thank you so much for watching us. And to the next episode. Bye.
Goodbye.